Okay friends, it's time to get started on our front end work. Obviously, you're going to want to make sure you have hand and eye protection for all this job. Aside from that, go ahead and safely raise and support your Jeep so the front wheels are off the ground. When you do that, you want to make sure you have your jack stands on the pinch rail. Let's get started. Now that we have the wheel up off the ground, let's continue on by removing all of our lug nuts and then the wheel. Now that we have the wheel off, we have a nice clear view of our brakes right here. As you can tell, ours are in very poor condition and they need to be serviced. Let's start off by pushing back our caliper piston. This can easily be done with a small pry bar right in through this slot right here. I'm just going to come in at an angle. I'm going to try to grab on to the forward part of the rotor, and then I'll go ahead and pry the caliper in this direction. That's going to push back the caliper piston. If you need to, you can come in through the backside here as well and just ensure that it's fully pushed in. There we are. Now let's continue on by removing our caliper slider pins. Remove your slider pins. Take notice of your slider pins. You'll notice that the upper one has a little rubber grommet on it. That's something that you want to pay attention to. If it looks like it's swollen or damaged in any way, you need to go ahead and replace that. Aside from that, just keep in mind that this one goes on the top when we go to reinstall. Let's set them aside. Remove your caliper and then hang it so it's putting no pressure on your flex hose. It's a good idea to take a peek at it. If you see any fluid coming from around here, that means it's brake fluid and you have to replace your caliper. This one looks okay. Now let's move along to removing our brake pads. Now on the back side of this, you're going to find two caliper bracket mounting bolts. Remove those as well. Remove your bracket. Now you're going to remove your brake rotor. If it seems as though it's stuck on there, you could carefully bonk it with a hammer, or if you wanted to, you can try putting a bolt in right here and just help it off. Once it's broken free, take it off. Now that the rotor's off of here, we have a nice clear view of the wheel bearing. You can see the mating surface that's going to hit up against the rotor. You want to make sure that that's nice and clean of any debris. Let's go ahead and clean it off. All right, that looks good enough. Now let's grab some copper never sees. Before you continue on by installing your brand new rotor, of course you want to clean down your braking surface. I'm just going to start on a lug nut to keep the rotor from wobbling around on me. Now we're at the point that we want to start cleaning up our caliper bracket so we can get ready to install it. So let's get to the bench. Okay, one of the first things we need to do here is go ahead and take the tins off. Just get in between the bracket and the tin, remove it. We're going to recycle those. Now the next thing you want to pay attention to is the area on the bracket where the tins are supposed to sit. So of course if you were to look at it, you can tell exactly where the tin hits. Any of those areas need to be cleaned nice and smooth. Now once you have those areas cleaned down, let's continue on to cleaning the areas where the slider pins are going to go. To do that, I'm going to have a collection bucket. I'm going to spray a little bit of parts cleaner right inside the hole here. We'll let it sit and do its job for 1 second. Now you need a bore brush, looks like this. We're going to come right inside this area. This is going to help ensure that we clean out any of the gunk that might be inside there. A little bit more parts cleaner. And empty it out. Go ahead and work the boots a little bit. We want to try to get out all of this parts cleaner. We're going to let it evaporate. Now if you wanted to continue cleaning these out, you could of course use a rag, give it a couple twists like this, and then put it right inside. Once you have it in, just go ahead and work that boot all around on the rag. That's going to help dry it off, and see if you can get inside the port that runs along here. Once you have it nice and dry, do the same to the other. Perfect. Grab onto your sliders. We're going to make sure that we clean these off you want to inspect them. See if you see any pitting or rust or anything. If it looks as though they're damaged or to the point that they're not going to be able to slide in and out of the bracket itself, you know you have to replace them. Now, once you have them wiped down, a couple areas to pay attention to, of course, would be the boot that I told you about originally. Just double check it. Make sure it's not torn or swollen in any way. If it's binding when it's inside here, you're going to have a caliper issue. You also want to pay attention to the shaft area. Like I said before, if you see any pitting or rust or anything that seems as though it's going to stop it from being able to slide, that's going to be an issue. You could try to sand it or even replace it. Mostly what matters, though, is up along this area right here where my finger is. That's where the boot's going to ride. If there's a lot of rust buildup there, the boot isn't going to be able to keep moisture out, and you're going to notice that you have a lot of rust inside this area here. Make sure that's nice and clean as well. Now let's start adding a little bit of lube to this. I want to go right where those caliper tins are going to go. So I'm going to go right along this area, and then the same on the other side of the bracket. Once we've done that, let's get the tins on. When you put this on, you want to ensure that it's facing in this type of direction, essentially. So it lines up with the caliper bracket. And then just go ahead and slide it on and make sure it stays on. If it feels as though it wants to fall off, well, then that's going to be an issue. That one feels good. Do the same to the other side. Clips in. Let's get back over to the Jeep. Now you want to clean off the threads for your caliper mounting bolts and then apply a thin amount of red thread locker. After that, grab your bracket, put it into its place, and start those bolts. Once they're both started, bottom them out and then torque them to 80 foot-pounds. Now it's going to be time to put on your brake pads. You got your ears. Let's line those up, slide it right in. Now let's have a look at our caliper. You want to ensure that your caliper piston's pushed all the way back in. If it isn't, just use a tool that looks like this and make sure it is. Once you've done that, let's continue on with some of that caliper grease, and we're going to go right along the piston area here. After you've done the piston, come along the backside of each one of these ears. This is going to help with vibration dampening and noise reduction. Set this over the pads. When you do that, you want to pay attention to your boots. If you push the boot like this, obviously it's going to be an issue. Just go ahead and let it in like that and make sure they're both the same. Now it's time for our caliper slider pins. We remember the one with the boot is on the top. Now when we put on our lubrication for this, you want to make sure that you get all the way down into the groove that I told you about where the boot's going to sit. If you don't get it on there, there's a possibility moisture will make its way in, and that'll be an issue. Slider with the boot. Slider without the boot. Start them both in, snug them up, and torque them to 32 foot-pounds. Let's get this off of here. And now you just put on your wheel. Okay, let's get our wheel back up on here. We'll snug up the lug nuts, get the wheel so it's just barely touching the ground, and then torque the lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds. Now with the wheel on the ground, we'll continue on to torquing the lug nuts in a crisscross manner. Torqued.